very welcome to the last video tutorial of our quilt of memories. We're on the final leg now, so bear with me and we'll get through to the end today. We're going to talk about quilting our quilt, which is a very important part of our quilt because it gives the quilt that lovely texture and that kind of touchy-feely look to it. There's lots of different ways of quilting your quilt. The first thing you need to do is decide what design you're going to go for. We're going to go for quite a simple one. We're going to look at two different methods and use both of them. One is quilting in the ditch and the other one is outline quilting. So in the ditch, which is just all around each block, inside between the seam lines, or outline quilting, which is just literally quilting 1/4 of an inch inside or outside each shape. So that's our design in the ditch or outline quilting. The next thing you have to decide is what method you're going to use. There are three methods available to us. We can hand quilt, we can do it on our machine, or we can send it away to be professionally quilted. So we're going to have a look at some. I have a little practice piece here that I've done earlier on. Literally what I did here was I just tried out a few different stitches on my machine. A few different quilting stitches. I'm going to do some quilting by hand as well. I just want to show you how to start and finish your hand quilting so that you get rid of that knot. We'll have no knots in our quilts. We're going to hide it, we're going to bury it in the middle of our quilt. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So if you're hand quilting, just take a piece of thread and put a knot at the end of it. Just make your knot, and you've already decided what design you're going to do on your quilt. So wherever you want to start, just stick your needle in about 1/2 inch away from where you want to come up to start your quilting design. Put your needle in and you're going to insert your needle into the middle layer of your quilt. You're not going to go out through the back, so we're going to bury that knot in the middle. So literally start about 1/2 inch where you want to, away from where you want to start. Insert your needle about 1/2 inch away from where you want to start. And then just pull on your thread and pop that knot through. And that should be enough to secure your thread initially. And then you're going to take nice running stitch, and this will be your quilting stitch. You'll hear a lot of people talking about the size of the running stitch and how, you know, it should be small. It doesn't matter what size your quilting stitch is. Just try and keep them all about the same size. I'm going to clip that away because I want to show you also how to quilt on your machine. Again, I suppose really the most important part here too is the stopping and starting. So this is a little one I practiced on earlier. I'm going to do another row of quilting on this. So literally we're going to put it under our machine. Now your quilt is actually much bigger than this, and in order for it to fit under the machine, you can just roll up one side. Just roll up your quilt, as in, imagine if that's our quilt there, you can just roll it up like this, okay, and then just lay it under your foot, under the foot of your machine, and put your presser foot down. And we're just going to take one stitch, just one stitch with our needle, and I'm going to tug that stitch a little, and up comes my bobbin thread. So I'm going to lift that out, take out your bobbin thread, okay, and then bring your 2 threads out to the back of your machine. Put down your presser foot again and take 3 tiny little stitches, and that will secure your quilting threads. And then move on a little, stop, and then just clip away those threads. Clip them away. So this will save a lot of time later. You won't have to bury those threads. All that will be done as you go along. And then just quilt your quilt in that lovely outline design that we were talking about earlier, which is just 1/4 of an inch on the inside of each shape. And the next thing we're going to talk about is binding. We're literally on the last stage of our quilt at this stage. So binding our quilt is just adding, you know, binding it in this lovely edge all the way around the quilt. So in the magazine, I've asked you to cut some binding strips. I'm just going to remove this from the machine. So we just take this away so we can work on our binding. Just put that to one side for the moment. So our binding, I've asked you to cut strips 2.5 inches wide by the width of the fabric. Normally you're buying your fabric and it's usually about 22 or 44 inches wide. So you're cutting a piece of fabric that is 2.5 inches by about 44. And we need to make one long continuous piece of binding so that we can go all the way around the edge of our quilt with one piece of binding. It's very simple to make. In order to do this, just get 2 pieces of binding, lay one down this way, right side up, and lay your other piece of binding down on top of it, perpendicular to the other. So you're laying your binding down like this, literally, and then you're going to sew from one corner to another in a diagonal line. So just sew all the way down in a diagonal line, and then we're going to cut that away. So I'm just going to cut away, leaving myself about 1/4 inch seam, and bend it over, and there we have our binding joined together. So now at this stage we're going to fold it in half lengthways. So let's just fold it. We're going to iron it. Oops. Loads of threads there. Okay, so fold it over. So now we have a double fold binding. Again, just fold it over. And as I say, you probably have about 3 or 4 pieces joined together to go around the edge of the quilt. So that's our binding ready and all to be sewn onto our quilt. So that's our next step. We do that straight in the middle. So I'm going to start about here. I'm going to put it onto the machine, and I'm going to show you exactly how to attach our binding. Before we do that, I'm going to turn down a corner on our binding like this. I'm going to press it. Forgot to do that, sorry. We're going to press it, and I want to cut away back to 1/4 inch here, so I'll just do that. Okay, and that's the starting of our binding. Okay, so you can see that. Again, all this is very clearly laid out in the magazine. I have the instructions there, so you can refer back to the instructions. So we're going to put this down. That's the start of our binding. There we go, get it onto the machine. Now we're going to sew right down to the corner. Again, we're just taking a 1/4 inch seam here. Off we go. So just attach your binding, taking a 1/4 inch seam, raw edge to raw edge. All the way down to the corner. And then we're going to stop a 1/4 inch from the edge of our quilt. So I'm going to mark it. I just have a little pin. I'm going to stick a pin in here about a 1/4 inch from the bottom. It shows me where to stop. I use it as a guide. So just going to move down to here and then take a back stitch. Take out the pin and literally take your quilt out of your machine. Okay. So you can see there I have added the binding. I started at the top and went all the way down to within a 1/4 inch at the bottom. At this stage I'm going to turn my quilt around and I'm going to lift my binding up and I'm going to bring it back down again. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a mitre so that when you fold your binding over your quilt you have that lovely mitred corner, and we're going to put that under the machine and we're going to sew all down along here. I'm just going to sew a little way down here so that you can see how to turn that corner. Whoops, thread is just caught there. Now, there we are. Okay, off we go. All the way down. Actually, I'll go down to the corner again. Take my pin. I'm just going to stick it in 1/4 of an inch from the edge just so I know where to stop. All the way down. Just take it out of the machine. And again, if I was continuing on here, I would shift my quilt around, just lift my binding up and straight back down, and I'd have a lovely straight edge along here, and then just again put it onto your machine and away you go. I wanted to show you what to do next. Because you have a double edge fold on your binding, all you literally have to do now at this stage is take it around to the back. Just like this, and then you're going to slip stitch that all the way around your quilt. What will happen at the corner is don't worry about this too much, just literally lift it over. You can see when I lift it over like that I have a lovely mitred corner here on this side, and exactly the same thing will happen as you are slip stitching all the way down here. Naturally it'll just, that mitred corner will literally just fall into place. That'll be the way it'll want to go, you know. So just you're slip stitching down along here. Just lift your binding over to the back. You have a lovely mitred corner there which forms naturally. Turn down this side, turn down that side, and you have a lovely mitred corner there as well. And just literally continue on slip stitching all the way around the back of your quilt. When you get to this area up here, there's a little pocket that we formed there earlier on. When you get to that area with your binding, actually I'll just cut a bit of this to show you what I mean. Just imagine that you're coming all the way down here. You can actually slip the end of your binding into that little pocket, and that will finish off your binding. When you turn it over you'll have that lovely biased edge on the outside, that lovely diagonal line. And that's it. All that's left then at this stage is to make a label. You can make your own label. I have a little label here I made earlier. All it says literally is Quilt of Memories, made by Rosaleen Dwyer for Irish Farmers Journal Quilting Tutorial Series, and I have the date on it, March 2012. You can attach that label then onto the back of your quilt. I've embroidered that by hand, but you can buy a pen and just write on a piece of fabric, but it's a good idea to label your work and to date it so it's there for posterity. And that will bring us to the end of our quilting tutorial series. Thank you so much for joining me on my journey in this Quilt of Memories. I hope your quilt has lots of lovely memories and that you get lots of joy from it. Thanks again. Bye bye.